Welcome to the Sean Trace Show. I have a really interesting guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and what you do, man?
Hey, Sean. My name is Jesse Will, and I'm a writer, mostly for magazines, and I am based in Austin, Texas.
Nice. Now, how long have you been writing? How did you get into this? What was your path that you followed?
It's been quite a while. I grew up in Ohio, and I went to school with an English lit degree, and I knew that I wanted to be in magazines, basically. So after I graduated, I moved out to New York and kind of spent like a year and a half, interning places and working at bars and just, what do you call it? Just trying to get in on the very lowest level. And then finally landed a spot at a magazine called House and Garden. And that just kind of started my career. Worked on staff as an editor at magazines for about 10 years. And then for the last 8 or so years, I've been freelancing. So basically I work out of the office, I pitch stories, I write them. I'm my own boss, which is good on most days and challenging on other days.
Tell me about that. What do you mean by that? That's an interesting thing.
Well, what is it? You say it's kind of a kill and eat thing. Like you're a hunter almost. Like as a freelance writer, you make your money on your ideas. So, so I'm constantly have in my Gmail, I have a draft folder of just a running list of ideas, 90% of which are like funny, bad, or unusable, and then there's a handful of them which might be good and saleable ideas. So yeah, it's a kind of a treadmill. You're always working. You always got to be kind of like, you got to keep your eyes open for anything which might be a story that could help you. And of course, you're always looking for ideas that kind of fascinate you or interest you or will keep your attention as a writer. Because once you land a story, you're in there for a while. And you want to find a story that is a place that you want to be in. If that makes sense. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah. How long do you normally stick? I interviewed a really interesting person a couple weeks ago, and he was a Nat Geo photographer, and he was talking about how when he gets onto an assignment, like it's months that you just dive in. How long do you really normally dive into a story? What does it take? What type of time commitment are you looking at per story?
It really depends. Sometimes I'll get assigned an interview or something like that where you have literally 2 days to prepare for it. So those can be a crash course. Sometimes those stories are due a couple of days after the interview. So that's a particular skill set where you have to suss out what's the most important research I can do for this person or this subject given the time span. And then writing it is another thing where you just you're just on the clock. So you got to just precisely figure it out really fast. And then there's other stories where it might be floating around for months or years in the back of your head where there's a puzzle piece missing. I can't tell this story until some news peg happens or, it's just, it just depends, I guess.
It's really interesting. It's interesting to think about because those are, like you point out, those are really different. Like if you get a celebrity interview, or it doesn't have to be a celebrity, any type of interview. Like you get that interview. There was I was watching some press junket interviews once, and they were like, what I noticed is that what you could see is that some of the questions were really interesting, really profound, and really, how do you approach your craft or your acting? But then there were some that were just like, you can tell just from the look and from everything, the questions swing and a miss, man. Just like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, those, if you watch, you're talking about celebrity press junket interviews. I think they fly, I've never done one, but they fly the journalist to a hotel or whatever. And the celebrity will be in staging room, and they'll kind of march,
press,
and everybody will have 10 minutes or whatever. But yeah, those can be funny because you can kind of sense some of the fatigue in the in the actors and actresses, like that they've done this all day, and sometimes that can result in just really funny off the wall answers because they're so tired and whatever. And then other times it's just, like you said, it's a swing and a miss. But there's also like two lines of questioning going on there, like. Some of these journalists are asking they want to hear oddball answers that might become viral on video or something like that. And then there's, other journalists who, even though they have 5 minutes or 7 minutes with someone, they want this actor to tell them the secret of life, which is like also just equally as absurd, So, but I guess that's the nature of the game. I mean, you can tell that some actors and actresses get really used to this. So they become unflappable basically.
There was one with the most recent Bond that just came out, and someone was interviewing, and it was like a podcast, and it was interesting because like. One of the things with the growth of podcasts too is like it used to be like the people would be able to have access to these people were, really seasoned journalists. Yeah. And now there's like people that are getting access that might not have had that experience. And you could see Daniel Craig's face was just kind of like, this question did not, like, do you even like Bond? Or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
It's really random. He's just... it was really interesting that it's really a very dynamic type of a thing that's really interesting like that. But, I could see that, there are some people that what's the meaning of life in 5 minutes? That's great, man. Great. And it's impossibility,
Right. And 90% of the time, the answer is going to be pretty much unusable.
Right.
10% of the time you'll get what you want.
Yeah.
But no hate on those journalists that do those junkets, because who knows? Maybe I'll be in that line someday,
Right. And I think that's the thing is it's like you did make a good point. Like you have to find a gem, whether it be a viral gem or, meaning of life gem. You got to find an angle, and it's you got to give people respect for trying. Like, I think that
it's true. It's totally true. Like when you are approaching a celebrity, their story has most of the time been told, right?
Yeah. See, that's it.
From a lot of different angles. So that story is not unique to you. So what you're trying to do is create a moment or an observation that is in fact unique and speaks to this particular time in this person's life and speaks to the work that they've been a part of making and might speak to what they're headed for in the near term. So I think that's the challenge with a famous person when you're covering them.
How do you go about, how do you start doing your research for the interview side? Where do you look at? Like, what type of information do you try to gather before you go and you speak with someone?
It's a good question. Like the most obvious, as a reader and a writer, the most obvious place, if I get assigned a profile of, Jon Hamm, it's to go back and read every feature story that's been written about him, whether it's GQ, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. I mean, all that stuff is searchable. Mm-hmm. And of a actor and actress of that caliber, they're going to have multiple examples of that story that's trying to tell their backstory, their motivations, who their parents were, where they grew up. So that is really helpful, but it's also a trap.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
That can be dangerous too, right?
Right. Because if you read enough of these stories, you start to notice the echoes. right? You start to see, well, of course, there's parts of a person's story that are true, and they're going to be necessary parts of a story.
Yeah.
But there are also just these kind of echoes that you see in pieces that questions keep getting asked because they were in that last story that was written about this person, right? So it's this continuation of maybe something that's not a major part of someone's life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically what I've found more helpful is to actually go back and look at as much of the work that an actor or actress has done as possible.
Okay.
So reading a little bit of that bio, but really just like digging down into as many movies, programs they've been in, because you find out that you have a different take on all of these works than, you might have thought, based on reading about them from Twitter, based on talking to friends. You just kind of get this alternate take on it, which I find really helpful when you actually get to the interview and you're talking to this person and you remark about some movie might be in obscurity, and they realize that you've actually taken the time to consider their output. And that kind of can lead to a good place, I think, because a lot of times if you ask them a question that they've been asked, or they know a facet of their life that's been written out about in a previous story, they might glaze over and give you this answer that they've given in previously. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's a certain element of cruise control that can happen in a celebrity interview, and you're always trying to like avoid that. And again, like create this unique dynamic moment or observe a unique dynamic moment.
That's really awesome. And it's tricky. It's tricky because I've seen it with my wife. My wife is a celebrity here in Vietnam.
Right. So she's got to be pretty polished.
She gets into cruise control. But it's also like we see that she comments to me this all the time. I said, how, she'll come home and, I have our daughter at home and I've been working and editing some video and our daughter's been playing. And I'll say, how was the interview? And she looks at me and she's like, they ask the same questions as every other interview. But there will be an occasionally one that comes through that someone will pick up on something that she's been doing, where they did some research and they'll watch, hey, I saw that you recently did this. And, my wife, one of her big things, especially during the pandemic, was gardening. We live in a concrete jungle. And and she put together a beautiful rooftop garden, and
cool.
It was some place that she went and kind of kept hers in. And one of the interviews that she did, they were asking, they said, I see your garden and it looks really beautiful. Like, why did you build a garden? What was your inspiration? And she was just like, boom, and she was like, I wanted to, suddenly it changed up the game. So so there was that uniqueness that, and it opened her up to talk about areas that she might not have talked about.
Right.
Otherwise,
Totally. I'm sure she has her polished answers, and then once she gets shaken up out of that, it's like, maybe there is something new to say. And what's interesting that you say about the pandemic and the garden, the pandemic has been a uniquely somewhat leveling feature to some of these interviews where the experience of being a celebrity is very unique, right? But the past 2 years, there's been a lot of similarities in the ways we've lived our lives. So that kind of leveling characteristic has been really an interesting aspect of the interviews that I've done in the last 2 years, I would say. It's interesting, no longer are these interviews, for the most part, taking place in the restaurant of a hotel, Mm-hmm. You're not writing about a food that this person is ordering anymore, right? Which is this very superficial stuff that in the old days we were taught that it led up to telling you something, a part of a bigger picture of this person, but it really, I'm not sure it did.
Yeah. Tell me, how do you like that fettuccine Alfredo?
Right, exactly. So of course, now some of these are on Zoom, and yes, you do miss a lot. Not able to observe someone interacting in the wild per se, but you do gain something in that this person is comfortable in their home when you're talking to them, and so there's a chance that they are going to be locked in as soon as the record button goes red, right? They are ready to talk. And if you have good questions, you're going to get somewhere faster with them, and possibly better and more revealing than if you were at the standard hotel on Friday night at 5:30 when people are starting to file in and stare at this person. And so, in some ways it's been pretty cool to do these interviews over Zoom. I won't say that I want to do them that way forever, but it's been cool.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I worked in Hollywood for a while, and I remember being in some of those hotels, and it's not, and just from my wife's experience, when we go out, she is on edge the entire time until we get into a room that's closed and things are, because otherwise she's always watching for cell phones being out, or someone paying attention, or just she's on guard. And it's interesting that, that's a good point. And do you have any things that you do, tools? I use comedy. I use kind of that's where, right when we were warming up, I started telling you about how my dog often vomits.
Yeah.
And, but for the people listening that didn't hear the story, my dog started vomiting in the middle of my interview yesterday. And luckily, because we have separate audio streams, I was able to cut it out and ignore my dog vomiting and clean it up post-interview.
Yeah.
But it was But, that's one of the things that I try to do, is to try to calm people down.
Yeah, totally.
You know where that came from for me though? Because I used to be a teacher.
Oh, okay.
And so I taught English for a long time when I was living in Asia, and that was one of the things that I could calm down a class by making people laugh, especially teenagers.
Yeah, that's a particular skill set. I wish it's just, teachers are fascinating to me. If the kids knew they could just overthrow this single person, I mean,
oh my gosh,
the secret's out. I mean,
we had in high school, we had a teacher that we had middle of my junior year. It was an interesting year, right? Because middle of my junior year, we lost our the juniors in high school are brutal, man. They are third year students in high school are just resist authority in the middle of the 90s.
They don't need to be taught anything else. They know it all.
Yeah, they know it all. And so we had one guy in my class, this guy Mike, and Mike was your picture perfect anti-authoritarian, and Mike was the student that no teacher wanted, not because he was bad. Mike was so smart, and Mike knew how to control the attention of the class.
Yeah.
And so he would be playing pranks and busting up.
Yeah.
But we lost our senior teacher in the middle of the year because he got a job at a university. And we got this junior teacher, Mr. Funkhauser. Mr. Funkhauser was fresh out of college, man. He
with a cool name to boot.
It was an awesome name, right? And so Mr. Funkhauser, for the first 2 weeks, tried to teach us English. Week 3, and Mike pretty much overthrew the class. They were just going at him, but by week 3, it was done. And he just started putting on movies. And it was great because he played.
How was that a strategy? I mean, yeah.
We didn't learn anything, but I don't think he was at that point in time. I just think he was done. But he put on the best movies ever, man. We watched all the Hitchcock movies, North by Northwest,
so there you go.
And The Birds, and some of the Citizen Kane, and a bunch of other great movies that now I look back and go, I am so thankful that we had a horrible teacher, because I just had a great.
That's where you got your education, right? What class was it again?
It was just a high school English class. It was our junior English class. And then he would show us this movie and be like, write a report on that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like you should maybe open this podcast to interviewing English teachers, because they might have more life secrets than anybody.
I did ask my old high school English teacher to come on, not Mr. Funkhauser. I gotta find Mr. Funkhauser and see what he wanted. He might, honestly, after that year, I think he probably went into insurance or something. Man, he was probably done with teaching.
He might be on a back porch somewhere.
Right. But it is interesting because, coming back to the, a lot of teachers do have those techniques to kind of disarm. How do you go about kind of, getting the thing calm? Because it's a people thing. How do you kind of calm people down and, get them kind of into the interview?
Well, I kind of try to do a slow burn, like real unassuming,
nice.
I don't want them to think that I think I'm cool, number one. I don't want them to know.
That's a great thing to
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you want them to know that you have other things going on in your life.
That's a good point.
Otherwise, it's a little bit creepy, right? And then the other thing is
That's actually a really awesome point. That's a really interesting point.
And because the nature of celebrity is such that there are a lot of creepy people that you can also find out so much about people now.
Yeah.
But also you don't want that person to know that you're over prepared almost.
That's a good point.
Because that can also, I think, send up their hackles. If you've read every single story about them, seen observed every Instagram post that they've done in the last year, listen to every podcast.
I have a side story I have to tell you after. Okay. So,
I mean, this actually is really helpful. I'm not saying if you're in this line of work to not do this, but you just don't want people to know that you've done that, because you really can find out a lot. But again, if you can listen to every podcast this person's been on, and if you bring up something obscure that they maybe said once, it can
That's not cool.
It can hit a black key on the keyboard where you're like, yeah. So, and then you have to spend 10 minutes kind of digging out of that place where their brain has turned off, or they've cooled to this conversation or whatever. So
that's really
you want to keep it as organic as possible, that you are a person in this world that deserves to be there, that you are not a sycophant, because that's also uninteresting, I think. And I guess that's my strategy. It works 50% of the time, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
For other people, they might have better strategies than I do, but that's mine.
No, that's really interesting. And I really like the point of having information, but not too much, because you see that people, this idea of celebrity is an interesting thing, because it's something that, there's almost that curtain, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they have to have a degree of a curtain to have a normal life, you know what I mean? And to kind of the idea of we're trying to get them to kind of pull back some of the curtain so that they can reveal some of that inner world. But the reality is like, and if you say, I've looked behind your curtain from other people, it can be a little unnerving, you know what I mean? Because that curtain makes people feel safe. What I laughed about, because I have to tell you why I laughed. So when I stumbled into the world. I am not famous, but my wife is, and I'm still don't have a full understanding of what that entails. But there was one day where I felt the weirdness factor went through the roof. I was suffering from gastrointestinal issues, and I needed to go. And the doctor says, you need to get a colonoscopy done.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that sucks. Not the most fun experience. So I go to this doctor, and I'm sorry, this is a really weird thing, but you're going to laugh when you hear the punchline. I swear to God. So I'm sitting there, the doctor's putting me on IV sedation. I'm starting to go under. And the nurse leans in, and she's like, I'm a big fan of you and your wife. Oh, what's happening? And it's just like, I'm going unconscious. About to have something in my nether regions, and the nurse leans in and is like, I'm a big fan of you and your wife. And I was like, am I supposed to give a thumbs up at that moment? Or
I think
like,
so,
what?
yeah. I think you only have two options, right? Because you're not in control.
And that was it. But it was like that. It was like, and that was exactly what you're talking about. For that moment of like, in that moment of vulnerability, I didn't need a fan at that moment. I needed someone that I could trust would just deliver the anesthesia correctly, would and like extremely vulnerable, maintain my privacy, you know what I mean? Like, and at that moment she just pulled that curtain back, and I was just like, oh God, this is not comfortable.
Like, who am I even?
And then I went unconscious and woke up 30 minutes later with an ice cream. You know, this was phenomenal. You know,
totally.
But it was like, it was really interesting because, and sorry, really inappropriate story, but again, that curtain, and you know, you got to make people feel safe, and if they don't, that's interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, it could have been even weirder if she didn't say anything, yet she was this big fan, right?
Exactly. You know what I mean? And that was her thing. Maybe that was her way of trying to get me to relax. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And with my sense of humor, I actually was just about ready to, I'm going unconscious and cracking up. I had to tell my wife about that as soon as I came to. But no, so it was a really interesting point. But you're right. If nothing was said. Now, coming back to when you go into, so you kind of differentiated two different writing styles, you know, the one which are these kind of things you dive into, and the second are these stories that you take time to craft over a period of time, right?
Yeah.
Now, how do you go about finding your inspiration for those stories?
I read a lot. You know, we are old school in this house. We get 2 newspapers, like on actual awesome. On actual paper.
I love it, man.
And I think what that leads you to do is read stories that you wouldn't otherwise.
Oh yeah.
Because that doesn't happen on the internet, right? You get pretty quickly to the headline or the story that you want to see, and reading the newspaper, your eye wanders off to this like other area sometimes where it's, you know, it could be a gem of an idea. Not that you're going to rewrite this story that you're seeing, but it could be a topic area or something where you look further into that category and find something that is unique that you do want to tell the story. So that's one thing I do. You know, there's other boring technical things I do, like use Google News. Like you can search newspapers through Google. So I have like alerts set up on general topic areas that I'm interested in. And every once in a while, I'll go back in and check through those to see if there's any news happening.
What are some of the topics that interest you?
Oh, let's see. Right now, I'm like really interested in, oddly, you know, botany. like science and botany.
Actually awesome.
Which is just really cool, because the thing that I like about my job and being a freelance journalist is you choose your own adventure. And if you are a curious person, you get paid, not a lot, but you get paid to investigate your passions or what you're passionate about that moment. So I like to start a story maybe knowing 0% about a particular subject. And then within 3 months, you have a pretty good picture of what's going on, right? And the other thing that I really love is in this line of work is you can pick up the phone, you can send an email to anybody you want, and they can say yes or no, that they'll spend 10 minutes on the phone with you. And this could be the, one scientist in the world that knows the most. They've spent their life studying an obscure cactus in the desert, which,
That's
has
awesome.
some secondary, compound that could become a medicine, something like that. This is a hypothetical, but there's a good chance they will jump on the phone with you, and like you can ask them the basics of what they know. And I feel like that is so valuable and so cool. And a lot of these people I get more nervous talking to someone like that than I would like a celebrity, right? Because it's so unique to be able to talk to people that have spent their entire life focusing on one thing. Whereas being a freelance journalist, you're kind of all over the place. Like, which is maybe why I'm not the best interview, to talk to for 10 minutes or whatever, because I'm more interested in what people do. But anyway, yeah, so that's a cool part of the job, I guess.
No, I think that's a really interesting part of the job. And I think it's interesting that you have the ability to ask. I remember in one of my high school, one of my college debate classes. It was like a fourth year college, like psych class. And we were doing a debate, and it was on repressed memories or something. And like the expert, and email was just getting started when I was in college. And I was really excited about, trying to research stuff. But it was like the main person for repressed memories was this Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. And I was like, I wonder if I can find her online. And so, I put together all my questions for the debate and some things I couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit lazy, so I didn't want to dig through the school library.
Yeah.
I've always been the type of guy where I like to find a workaround. And so I was like, well, I can dig through all these books to kind of find my answers. So I put together this list of questions, and I just found this email for this doctor, and I emailed her all these questions, and she came back with all of her answers.
Yeah.
And I remember, I didn't tell my teammates that, and then all of a sudden, then I was like, in the middle of the debate, everyone's going their point, and I was like, well, when I emailed Dr. Loftus last night, and her response was this, I could just see my professor in the corner going,
yeah, you score points.
And my the other team, my friend was on the other team, and he was just like, he crossed there, and I was just like, but it was like, it was a moment that blew my mind, that here's this person that you read about in a textbook, these people that you see, and they're so far out there, and it's like these people that seem so inaccessible. And it's not that they're inaccessible, it's just, I can't even imagine dedicating 40 years of my life to the study of one specific thing, a science. You look at these Nobel Prize winners, right, that have literally spent their entire lives researching this one sequence of DNA, and they learn how to fix that, and then they've cured this condition that has haunted mankind for 1,000 years. That to me is so terrifying that you can, to think about that. But then,
it's terrifying, but it's also like a gift, right? It's a gift that I don't have, to be able to focus on one thing for 40 years. But I am so glad that some people are, right?
Yeah. And it's beautiful that we can talk to them, and that they are accessible,
Yeah.
And there was one thing that I love. There's been a thing that I've loved about the advent of the internet and of all of these things, because I found this one software, and what it did is it's kind of like it was like a deep fake, but then you took your photo and you kind of fed it into this deep fake, and so I went and I was like, that's really interesting. And so I found some photos of my grandma, my mom's mom. My mom's mom died when my mom was 13, and it was a really long story short. My mom was always haunted by that, 13-year-old kid losing her mom. And I got this deep fake, software, and I sent this little video of my grandma moving, because we don't have any videos.
Yeah, is it one of those things where it like kind of animates it just a tiny bit?
She moves around and looks and smiles. It was just something really simple like that.
Yeah.
My mom started bawling, man.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and what it made me realize is like, how many more of these people we need video of? We need talking. We need, to hear their stories,
Right.
It's
yeah.
so important.
Totally.
To preserve it. They're national treasures. They're international treasures, man.
Right. Well, it's cool when tech kind of delivers on its promise like that.
Right.
Because it doesn't always.
No.
Yeah.
What are some stories that you would love to tell? I mean, without giving away, stories that you'd love to tell.
Without giving away. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm working on several right now, which are kind of like long in the works. But, the stories that I like to tell are very observational, I will say, like without getting into topics or whatever. But
no, yeah, protect those topics.
The stories that I like to tell are, I think they are kind of the opposite of very like plot heavy, surprising narratives that, a lot of maybe podcasts focus on, where it's like true crime or this unbelievable thing happened to this person that is so far outside of the ordinary. And I just think like a lot of those stories they're not as revealing as they kind of pretend or, present themselves as being. So I like to just go out in a place and report and observe and let the characters tell their own story through as many of their words as possible.
I love that, man.
And I'm speaking very generally, but I think that can be super revealing. And I love like taking a guess on a story. When you pitch a story before you've traveled for it, before anything. I'm thinking of one in particular. I wrote about this Lakota basketball tournament in South Dakota. Your dad's there, right?
Yeah.
And it was just like a guess that this would be kind of cool to see. And when we got there, it was just like so revealing. Everybody I talked to told part of the story, just of every facet of this Native American kind of cultural coming together. And that's the kind of story that kind of interests me the most, I guess. Long-winded answer, but
no. That
yeah.
I'm a person who's lived around the world, and the majority of my time living in other countries has been very normal. It's not, there are those days that are wild where you see something that you're like, oh my God, that is just completely, but that's not your normal day-to-day life,
Yeah.
And even if someone was to go back and, look at my life, some fantastic, I was a winner on The Price is Right.
Yeah, are you serious?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. Totally.
Oh wow.
I was on The Price is Right.
Which era?
Oh, geez. I was in, when I was living in LA in around 2008, 2009. Okay. I can't remember. But yeah, I got to look up that. If I ever get famous, that will be my Aaron Paul Price is Right moment.
Yeah, sweet.
It's one, they called me down to the front row. It's I'm screaming, this is awesome. And there's a way to get on. So if you do your research, so they interview everyone when you're waiting outside. And the way to get called is to freak out like you're insane.
Yeah.
When they're doing your interview, like my friend was like, dude, we read on the internet, you gotta be wild.
Yeah.
And my friends are like, yeah, we're happy. And I was like, dude, you ain't seen nothing yet. And I'm just like, yeah, just freaking out, like completely freaking out. And they were like, I could see a producer off to the side, like, this guy brings it, man, because they don't want someone to be coming down to the front and the Price is Right. And be like, yeah,
like monotone, right? Yeah. They need action.
Which it'd be awesome if they did. You can think about like an episode of The Price is Right with like completely unenthusiastic people. It would be hilarious. So like, I don't want that. You
just like volume of 2. Yeah, totally.
Right. So, but and then I won my show because I messed up on the wheel. That wheel is extremely heavy. Like I always was like, I'm gonna go on there and I'm just gonna like, it's really heavy. And I was like totally unprepared for how heavy that damn wheel is. Didn't spin. I wanted to get to the Showcase Showdown. Yeah, but like again, an absolutely wild day of my life that isn't completely non-representational of the rest of my life.
Totally, I get it. Yeah, since we're talking about kind of the mundane versus the extreme, like one of the stories that I think about that I've been a part of is I wrote about these border patrol, a team of border patrol guards in San Diego who are in charge of going down in the tunnels between Tijuana and San Diego, basically. So they go down 20 feet underground, crawl through these tunnel systems that have been dug, by drug runners. And that's what they do every day. Like every day they search for these things. And I joined them on one day, and it was a mundane day for them, right? But it was so extreme to me. Like, and the story came about, like, I think I had pitched it because I had heard of this team of agents called the Tunnel Rats, which is, of course, a fascinating, interesting name that kind of calls back to Vietnam era stuff. But I expected to email the U.S. Border Patrol and either not get a response or, I thought there would be many layers of tape to jump through, right? Yeah. And then I immediately, like an hour later, got an email that's like, can you meet us at the Starbucks? We'll be there in 2 weeks in San Diego.
It was your come on down moment. Come on down.
It was like, come on down to this drug tunnel 20 feet under the ground. It's pitch black. It smells terrible. You're going to think you're going to die, but come on and join us. But
I couldn't even imagine, man.
But yeah, so it was one of those like careful what you wish for moments, because it was also, sometimes when you're pitching stories, I'll pitch 10 stories and the 10th story on a list is the one that I'll want to do least. And that's always going to be the one that gets the yes, right? Like without. So of course it's like a month later and I'm in a tunnel underground, like with these guys, but it was hilarious. And I mean, that's an example of another story that I like to tell is something that is very mundane to your subject, but is very crazy to you as an observer, right? Just to show how diverse and wild people's lives are.
Right.
When you're sitting in a restaurant, you have no idea what's in these people's brains, right? They could be like the expert on a crazy thing that cures cancer. Like you just have no idea what people are inside. And that's like fascinates me. And that kind of keeps me going and makes me, like to tell stories.
I love that, man. And I love that, like, on your Instagram, you have some of these amazing, like anecdotes about that flashback to some of these interviews that you had. It just, there was, my uncle was one of the most influential people in my life. And I just remember, like, he would just be constantly dropping these wisdom bombs. You know what I mean? Just like, and it was really interesting because he lived such a crazy life, you know, grew up in the Battle of Britain and was, you know, constantly telling us about what it was like when he was out in the countryside. And then my family, you know, moved out of the UK to Africa. They lived in Kenya and then South Africa before they immigrated to the States. And like, he would just tell us, he and my dad would tell us these amazing stories. And, you know, and it was a fascinating and wild stories to us, but it was just what they grew up with, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, and again, one of those things too, is I think that I was a history major in university. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I find when people don't study enough history is we repeat the same mistakes again and again and again. And, you know, it's like, and I think that if we're not listening or we're not telling those stories and sharing those stories, we're going to be missing out on something, you know?
Right. You know, it's true. You're always attempting to be, you know, as a writer, I'm always attempting to be a better listener. Like, I can write as well as I can write, right? Mm-hmm. But you can always reel it back and try to listen as hard as possible to the things that a subject is saying, and also listening to what they're not saying. And sometimes, you know, I'll read a transcript and I'll just shake my fist because I missed something that they said. Right. You know, like, you know, sometimes it's really the things that they don't say that you're like, oh God, that was the moment. They're waiting for you to ask a question about something else. They're giving you a little, you know, what is it called? Reese's Pieces for ET or whatever, right? Like, they're giving you a trail you're supposed to follow, and sometimes you don't catch that trail.
I every single time I edit my videos, I'll find places that I missed cues.
Right.
Every time, man. I'm just like, oh, dude, I missed it right there. I didn't hear, or I wasn't listening well enough, or I might have been prepping my next question in my head.
Totally. And you have to do that. That's the nature of the thing. But, you know, but that's, you know, I'm sure you're like this with the podcast, but like, and I'm like this with my next story is like, and this is a cliche, of course, but it's like the one that you're the most excited about is the next one that you get to do, because you're always trying to correct yourself. You're always trying to get better. Because you just, you try to move onward and try to do better. And, you know, you're never good enough, which keeps, you know, keeps you going. Right.
Yeah. But there's always that, you know, with this, I've been really happy about being able to create a space that people can share. And, you know, I've had people who've sent me back emails that they've gotten, or messages that they've gotten from people who were like, you know, really inspired or touched by these people sharing their stories.
Which is that is the best outcome, right? It's not like it's not somebody listening to this. It might be hearing from a third party that someone heard this and it influenced what choice they made, you know? It's very cool.
It's super cool because, you know, it's like that butterfly effect, you know? Maybe we're starting a change here that causes this ripple effect that affects someone's life in a, you know, better, you know, 3 or 4 degrees out, you know? Whatever cool degrees of Kevin Bacon you are from that story.
Exactly. Yeah.
I got a Kevin Bacon of 1. I am excited about that.
Oh, really?
So, oh yeah, man. I've never worked with Kevin, but I've got only 1 degree that I'm removed from Kevin. So
that's pretty close.
That's pretty close. Yeah. I worked with Tom Hanks on Angels and Demons, and Tom Hanks was on Apollo 11. So
okay, there you go.
My friend is the only person I know who's worked with Kevin Bacon. So, God, that's the one celebrity that I need to.
That's why you got to move. You got to move back to the States.
Right? Got to get my Kevin Bacon number down to 0.
Yeah, totally. Make that the goal.
Right. Well, what advice would you give to someone or to yourself, your younger self, before you were embarking down this career path?
I would say, I mean, without a doubt, don't wait for people to say yes to what you know is a good idea.
Yeah.
Because when you enter, you are so young and you have your ear to the ground and you kind of know what's happening. And the people in control are going to be older than you, and they're going to be a little more out of touch, and they're going to say no to a lot of stuff. So I would say keep writing. Tell the stories that you think need to be told. And don't listen to anybody. And a lot of those stories, maybe no one will read. And then the 10th of those stories might be the one that captures somebody's mind and starts a new path for you. So yeah, I mean, as a younger person, I just wish that I cared less about the rejections and getting the no's than just like, writing whatever I wanted to, putting it on a blog. And then by doing work that you're interested in, you attract people that are interested in that type of work. And I think that kind of is a kind of snowball effect. Whereas if you're always trying to get yeses and trying to impress people, you're kind of entering this matrix of like, you've got to do this right. You've got to do this right. And I feel like that's harder to do. Having said that, I'm still like in that process, right? Or I'm still, still trying to do that, even though I'm like, mid-career.
There's this balance between, I see it for my wife as a musician. She has to sing the songs that people like.
Right.
Because she wants to get paid and she wants to make it. But then
totally.
she also has to balance
that's a good point.
The stuff that feeds her soul,
Totally.
So there is that balance. She has to push her personal boundaries that are over here.
Right.
That are the stuff that really drives her forward. But then on this side, she's got the stuff that pays the bills, and so it is that's
a big one. That's a big one.
But you can't let this dictate everything, because it will suck your soul dry. You know what I mean? It was that famous story of like, I don't know if this is completely true, but like you get someone like, was it Bobby McFerrin, who at some point in time never wanted to, was just not a huge fan of Don't Worry, Be Happy. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so you got to find what makes you happy. If you ever see his live sets of music, man, the man was a musical genius. And and he went out and made the music that he wanted to make, because that's what fed his soul. Is like amazing music that guy made. But sadly, a lot of people only know that one track, which is a disservice to the true artist that person was.
They weren't listening to the message of the song. They were angry about Don't Worry, Be Happy, right? It's just...
Right. Now, if you had Aladdin's lamp, you can kind of wish for anything, like in career or anything else. What would you wish for?
Oh my goodness. And it has, that's a tough one. I mean, health for everybody that health for everyone that I'm around, I think. I mean, that's a boring answer, but
no, not at all, man. It's a tricky question.
Yeah. And just like more time.
Right.
More time, and not in like a sense of like, I want to get my to-do list done today. It's just like, I'm just still have so many things I want to figure out. There's so many things I'm interested in. There's so many things I want to write about. There's so many things I want to experience. Like, you just want to just slow time down for a minute and do it all.
Right. Someone once asked me, like, we were discussing the Highlander, which, is definitely a very philosophical topic, we were talking about, would a person you want to live forever? And a lot of people were like, yeah, why? I want power. I want this. And I was like, no, I want to live forever. But for one other reason, I want to know. I don't want to know. What do you want to know? At all. I'd love to know. You know what I mean? I love to understand stuff. Like, right. I'd love to know the secrets of the universe. Not because, I want anything up on anyone. It's just the world is a fascinating place,
Yeah. I was telling you this, how I'm into like botany right now. And I just did a reporting trip that involved some botany and involved some botanists that were doing some research on some plants. And I kind of drove away from West Texas, like with my mind blown. And it's like in some of these categories and places, the more you know, the less you know. So it's just like, I have so much more to learn about all these things. I don't know. So that's what keeps me going.
Right. I'm fascinated. One of the things I'm fascinated by, what blows me away? Like, for just how crazy the universe is. Like, orchid mantises. The little praying mantis that looks just like an orchid. Like, how did nature...
Right, the adaptation that
like, how does that animal, like, process that? You know what I mean? It's not sitting there going, I want to look like that orchid. You know what I mean? And natural selection doesn't necessarily make that's not going to happen. You're like, there's like this intelligence to nature itself, man. And that's what I would love to know. I just saw this picture of, I think it was a grass or some type of plant that was in South Africa that had an adaptation that makes it look like it has been chewed up by like cattle or goats or something like that. So it looks like frayed and gray and chewed up, but that's actually just a dupe. Like it just grows like that so that it doesn't get chewed up. Dude, that's insane, man. That's awesome. Nature's
like,
so
that
cool.
is so psychedelic and weird. Like this world is bonkers.
Right? It's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the deep dive down to the bonkers world today, man.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I would love to have another conversation with you sometime, man. If you'd ever like to come on, always welcome.
It was nice talking to you, Sean. Good luck with the podcast. It's very exciting. I will look forward to hearing and seeing more of it.